I ended up working nights twice, years apart, for reasons that didn't feel important at the time. The first was a security desk job in a mixed-use building. The second was overnight technical monitoring for a company that ran its own internal systems. Both paid a little more after midnight, and both fit around other things I had going on. That was basically it. The routines were similar. Badge in, log the start time, skim whatever notes the day shift left. The coffee in the break room was always old by the time I got there, so I stopped bothering with it after a few weeks. Most of the work came from automated checklists that reset every shift. You'd confirm doors were secure, dashboards were green, cameras were online. When nothing changed, you just confirmed it again an hour later. Night work teaches you pretty quickly that empty buildings aren't unusual. Hallways echo, elevators cycle without anyone inside. Systems keep running whether people are there or not. Orientation materials leaned into that. They stressed self-reliance, clear escalation paths, and not overreacting. Incidents were described as rare and usually the result of user error or maintenance windows. At the time, that made sense to me. The environments felt quieter, more procedural. Most things were designed to run unattended, and I trusted that if something mattered, it would show up in an alert or get flagged by someone on days. I didn't think much beyond that.
The first things that stood out were small and easy to explain away. Alerts that would pop and then clear themselves before I finished reading them. Motion events logged in the system with no corresponding camera clip attached. Access requests marked approved with the requester field left blank. Stuff like that. I noted a few timestamps out of habit. 02:14:33, motion detected, zone C3, status resolved. 02:58:01, access override, approval logged. There wasn't much else to go on. No error codes, no follow-up messages. The dashboards would return to green and stay there. The incident reporting tool made it simple to move on. Most entries defaulted to no action required, and closing them was basically one click. I assumed it was software quirks or maintenance tests running after hours. That happened often enough that no one questioned it. Overnight patches, sensor recalibration, that kind of thing. Fatigue probably didn't help. Long stretches where nothing changed made it easy to zone out. I'd catch myself rereading the same panel, trying to remember if I'd already checked it. Supervisors weren't reachable overnight except through tickets, and tickets rarely got responses before morning. Everything about the process encouraged letting the system handle itself. Escalation trees were clear, but rarely triggered. Auto-closure rules did most of the work. At the time, it all felt like normal night shift noise. I didn't see a reason to treat it as anything else.
The second job came a few years later. Different company, different city, different kind of building. I didn't connect it at first. Overnight technical monitoring instead of a security desk. Better pay, more screens, less walking. The routines were almost the same. Badge in, system check, confirm overnight status. The software looked different on the surface, but the layout felt familiar. Color-coded alerts, collapsible panels, auto-generated summaries at the top of the hour. The terminology lined up more than I expected. Event acknowledged, no action required, resolved at source. The training PDFs emphasized continuity of operations and something they called perception management. That phrasing stuck with me, but I didn't question it. It was framed as keeping reports clean and avoiding unnecessary escalations. Most events were logged under broad categories: environmental anomaly, access variance. When you broke down the monthly numbers, those categories barely registered.
Out of curiosity, I started looking at archived reports, older ones from before my shift. The phrasing was familiar in a way that didn't make sense. Sentences I remembered seeing years earlier showed up again, just with different timestamps and location IDs. I assumed templates were being reused. That's normal in large systems. Responsibility was spread across vendors, internal teams, and third-party monitors. If something didn't escalate, no one owned it. That felt like standard corporate structure. At the time, the repetition didn't bother me. It just registered as industry standardization. I didn't see a reason to think otherwise. The access came through a compliance audit tied to my role. Nothing special. We were told to review historical records to confirm retention rules were being followed. Read-only access, limited scope. The folder structure was already there. Year ranges, site IDs, classification codes. The files were summaries, not raw logs. File names like ONI_sum_2019_Q4_site17.pdf or NX-audit 2021-INC-close.csv. Most entries covered overnight incidents across multiple locations. I didn't open everything. I just skimmed headers and metadata. Some classifications repeated more than I expected. Staff presence anomaly, unverified activity, almost all marked closed. What stood out was how often the follow-up fields were empty. There were checkboxes for escalation, review, corrective action. Many were left blank but still stamped as complete. Timestamps showed closures within minutes, sometimes seconds. I assumed automation was doing most of it. Around then, I changed a few habits. I stopped doing full walkthroughs and stayed closer to my desk. I checked access points twice before settling in. It felt like tightening up, not reacting, just being thorough. The systems themselves looked solid. Multiple layers, cross-checks, audits. The odd part was how little curiosity they seemed to have about their own flagged data. Everything was categorized, filed, and closed. Nothing asked why. At some point, I stopped looking at single-site summaries and started opening the aggregated reports. Those lived in a different directory, usually quarterly or annual. The file names were broader, regional comparisons, multi-year spans, charts more than text. Most of it was night shift data pulled together and normalized. The language shifted again. Incidents weren't described as events so much as variants, spikes, baselines, tolerances. There were graphs showing frequency over time with shaded bands marked acceptable. Anything inside those bands wasn't flagged. The focus was on thresholds, not on what actually happened during any one entry. One planning memo was attached as a reference. It was short. I remember one line because it didn't feel like it was written for staff at all. Priority should remain on operational confidence rather than exhaustive resolution. There was no follow-up section. Staff turnover appeared as a column in several tables. Attrition rates were tracked alongside incident frequency, treated as neutral or even stabilizing. No notes about retention or feedback loops, just numbers. I didn't see anything that suggested intent or targeting. That's not what this looked like. It read more like a system designed to absorb irregularities without changing. The more of it I read, the less my role seemed to matter. Everything important was already averaged out.
I'm posting this now mostly because I ran into the material again. I don't work nights anymore. I closed out an old account tied to my second job, mostly to clean up loose ends. Part of that process involved a data access review. The archive links were still active, same directory structure, same file dates, nothing updated, nothing removed. I want to be clear that I'm not accusing anyone of a specific act. There's nothing in the records that points to a single incident or decision that could be pulled out and argued over. And nothing in it suggests something happened to me personally that I didn't already log at the time. That's not what this is. What stayed with me was how the night shift experience gets handled once it's written down. Individual entries are collected, summarized, and rolled upward until they're just part of a larger data set. Names drop off early, locations blur together. What's left is structure and frequency. From the system's perspective, that's a completed process: collection, abstraction, storage. No further action unless a threshold is crossed. According to the documentation standards I worked under, that's considered a resolved state. This post is the same thing, just another record, preserved and left where it is.